Here we are in our third segment. We have taken the journey from Lothal, the port of the Harappans in Gujarat. We have come down to Haryana in Rakhigadi, where perhaps the oldest DNA samples of ancient Indians belonging to the Saraswati Indus civilization have been found. We've taken slightly north of Delhi with my colleague Siddharth in Sinoli and UP, where just a few years ago they found 4,000-year-old chariots and swords and tombs. Now we go to the east of India, near the capital of the great Ashoka, the man who put up his stone and 14 pillar edicts all across the country. My colleague Urvashi Khona is with us just south of the city of Patliputra, the ancient University of Nalanda. Urvashi, before we come across to you for you to show us around, a quick reminder to our viewers about Nalanda.
In ancient Magad, modern-day Bihar. Established during the Gupta Empire, Nalanda dates back to the 3rd and 13th century BCE. Comprising of monastic and scholastic institutions, Nalanda is home to the most ancient universities in India. Nalanda also played a vital role in promoting the patronage of arts and academics during the 5th and 6th century CE, a period that has since been described as the golden age of India by scholars. It testifies to the glory and the development of Buddhism in the subcontinent. We now bring you this exclusive and special report from Nalanda.
Okay, let's head across straight to Urvashi. Urvashi, Nalanda, perhaps the oldest and greatest university on earth. It predated the great library of Alexandria. How excited are you of where you are? I know, there's only X we can see of the remains from where you're standing, but do your best to show us around, please.
Nalanda was ancient Buddhist monastic university in ancient Magadha, now in modern days called as Bihar. Well, yes, and behind me you see this very particular last stupa of the Nalanda University, Nalanda Mahavira as it is called as. This is the 14th stupa is what we understand, and the last stupa in the whole area. Well, considered by the historians to be the world's very first residential university and one among the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world, this very particular Nalanda Mahavira is located near the city of Rajgira and also is somewhere one of the topmost established during Gupta Empire era, but then is supported by numerous Indian and Javanese patrons, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist, is what we understand. Over here, for some 750 years, it had its faculty included some of the most revered scholars of Mahayana Buddhism. Nalanda Mahavira taught 6 major Buddhist schools and philosophies such as Yogacara, Sarvastivada, as well as subjects such as grammar, medicine, logic and mathematics. The university was also a major source of 657 Sanskrit texts carried by pilgrim and several other 400 Sanskrit texts that were carried by Yijing to China in the 7th century, which influenced East Asian Buddhism. Many of the texts composed at Nalanda played an important role in the development of Mahayana and Buddhism, is what we try and understand. This whole excavation site that you are seeing is now controlled by ASI, that is Archaeological Survey of India, and this very particular part is the stupa that you saw, and
yes.
If we this is the end part, and as we go towards the front side, there are as it is called as Chhatra Vastra.
Okay.
Which means
Okay.
those are the residential
Okay, so
blocks.
we should just, please, draw the correlation for us, because when you're talking about the correlation to the nearness of where Nalanda is to Patliputra, is predating Alexander the Great. I mean, the Nandas had 100,000 strong army at the time with mounted elephant cavalry. before the time of Alexander the Great, okay, by the time he came to India. And then, of course, immediately after that comes Chandragupta Maurya from Takshila. His tutor is Kautilya, who wrote the Arthashastra. So, and his grandson, of course, is Ashoka the Great. How does this all link together, Urvashi?
The history of Nalanda in the first millennium BC is linked to the city Rajgriha, now in modern days called as Rajgira. Now, if you have to speak and talk about the capital of Magadha, that is Rajgriha, it is linked to this very particular whole Nalanda, Mahavira and Nalanda, as you see. Now, this is on the trade routes of ancient India. And if you have to speak about the whole area over here, the early Buddhist texts state that the Buddha once visited a town near Rajgriha called Nalanda, where we are right now, and he delivered the lectures in the nearby mango grove named Pavarika, and one of his two chief disciples, Shariputra, was born in the area and later attained nirvana there. Talking about the Ashoka, a Buddhist text named Nikaya Samagraha does state that the Emperor Ashoka established a vihara, that is a monastery, at Nalanda. And however, the archaeological excavations that are there have not yielded any monuments from the Ashoka period yet, or from another 600 years after his death, is what we try and understand. But yes, this is one of those beautiful sites where we are right now, and it gives so much of knowledge, because yes, this is that very particular site that has been.
Okay, Urvashi, of course, we had taken you across to Patna to cover, the electoral politics with Nitish Kumar and changing sides and all of that, and in between the rough and tumble of modern times, which is how I consume my day. An opportunity to go to the historic Nalanda and show that to our viewers. I'll just come back to Urvashi in just a second. Let me hop across to Abhijit. Abhijit, now let's put the historical context first, okay? So we have gone Rakhi Gadi talking about the Vedic times, okay? Now we are talking about the first millennia BC, and now here the archaeological findings are pretty strong, because we have the 14 pillar edicts, the stone edicts of Ashoka. I mean, all the way in Afghanistan, you can find the Ashokan edicts, the iron pillar which was brought to Delhi. There's another pillar which is near Sri Fort, which has been brought to Delhi during the past a few decades. So this is known otherwise as the first golden age of India. Can you put this into context for us, please?
Yes, so we are now coming essentially into the modern era, if you look at the bigger context of Indian history. So Nalanda it is part of the Magadha heartland, the Bihar heartland. It is very close to the ancient capital Patliputra and also to the other capital Rajagriha. Now, as far as we know, Lord Buddha did spend some time in this area. Even Lord Mahavira is said to have spent a few varshas in this region. But at that time, it seems that there was no university over there. There must have been some Bihar or something. But as far as we know, that the university itself, the university proper, was founded by the great Gupta Emperor Kumaragupta I in somewhere around the 5th century AD. Because we had some Chinese pilgrims who came before, and they don't mention a university in this region. And like the lady said, even the archaeological evidence doesn't bear out the presence of a great university before this period. So most likely it was the great Gupta Emperor Kumaragupta I in the 5th century AD who founded this university, and it went on to become a massively influential center of learning. Many Javan kings patronized this university. There was a king from Sri Vijaya in the 9th or 10th century who patronized it, and donated some money and all that. And lots of pilgrims from all over the civilized world would come and gain knowledge. There were a couple of Chinese pilgrims like Fahian and some other guy as well, who came over here, and they were deeply interested and impressed, and they brought back a lot of Sanskrit literature all the way into China, where it was translated, and that is how India inculturated China.
Okay, so let me put the same question.
Nalanda is at the heart of this.
Yeah, so let me put the same question to Rituraj. So Rituraj, the transition now from the Sinoli era, of which we know very little, okay, we are still discovering, and perhaps it'll be decades before we have a clearer picture. But now the picture is much clearer. So we know about the Nandas, we know about the Mauryas of Chandragupta and his grandson Ashoka. Then we know about the Gupta dynasty, the second golden age of India, and the Ashokan edicts. And I read one at the very top of this broadcast. What is this transition in history telling us about? Because the Ashokan edicts from Odisha all the way to Afghanistan.
See, I think before we begin, we must look at the larger picture. We are talking about a university as massive as the Harvard University is, or the Columbia University. So we are actually looking at a Mahavihar that actually would have, have had that stature in the past, thousands of years ago. So this, I mean, putting things in the, things into perspective, this is the scale of a university, a massive university that we're talking about. Now, talking about that cultural connect from Sinhauli or from the IVC sites to how we progress to this particular part of the world, I think, the written word spread, as we reach this particular state. So we have foreign travelers accounts. We have Fayan, we have Yun Sang, who wrote, volumes about, how beautifully fascinating these particular places were. We even have written accounts from the IVC sites. It's just that we haven't deciphered the Indus Valley script yet. So, who knows, we discover the Rosetta Stone and it's all clear for us to, widely open for us to study. It's just that from this particular period, the Nalanda and the Takshashila phase, we have a lot of written accounts. And had it not been for that massive fire that took place in the 12th century, we could actually have had, literally 9
who
million
knows? Who knows what was lost in that fire? But, Rituraj, so with that transition to written accounts, okay, and this is the transition from what we were talking about in the last part of this conversation, the Copper Bronze Age, okay. Now you have here facto the Iron Age. Everybody knows about the Iron Pillar that's next to Qutub Minar in Delhi. Everybody's seen it, okay. So this is hard Iron Age. Advanced civilization with large armies, hundreds of thousands of people, cavalry, elephant warriors, okay, great cities. This is, as Abhijit was saying, we are talking about something that was would be very familiar to modern day viewers.
Absolutely. It's like a living university. So you're actually looking at a university which was residential. Some scholars have even, proclaimed that Nalanda was the first residential university in the world. And I wouldn't be surprised, really. I remember talking to one of my colleagues, at UNESCO. She was talking about the excavations that had taken place at Takshila. And they had discovered surgical instruments, which actually were far ahead of their times. So the students who were studying in these universities were actually studying, advanced surgery, plastic surgery.
We have historical records that indicate first cataract surgeries, first plastic surgeries, which is basically fixing damage to the face, were all done first in India. Even optometry, which is correct vision correction, etc., etc. Okay, let me just take a pause for the cause and go back to Urvashi, who's there in Nalanda. Urvashi, if you could just do your best to just show us around so that we can get a look and feel of people who have not been able to go there. Maybe you can inspire them to go there. Urvashi, you can still hear us.
Well, we are at one of the oldest and the greatest universities on this very particular earth. We are talking about Nalanda Mahavira in Bihar's Nalanda area, and we are very much over there. This is that very particular outstanding archaeological site of Nalanda Mahavira that is located in the northern eastern state of Bihar in India. This is spread over an area of 23 hectares, and the archaeological site of Nalanda Mahavira remains dating from 3rd generation BCE, with one of the earliest and the largest of its time and the longest serving monastic scholastic establishment in Indian subcontinent. Well, if we have to talk about this very particular whole archaeological remain, this particular site that you're seeing in front of your screens, it comprises the archaeological remains of the monastic and the scholastic institution dating from 3rd century BCE to the 13th century CE. It includes stupas, shrines, viharas. There are also residential and educational buildings all across, and there are important artworks in stucco, stone and metal. Nalanda stands out as one of the most ancient university of the Indian subcontinent. As I said earlier, it engaged in the organized transmission of knowledge over an uninterrupted period of 800 years. The historical development
It's really pretty, Urvashi. Thank you for just showing us around. I mean, photos do speak 1,000 words, and nothing like being on the site. As I mentioned, so much drama happening in Patna down the road just in the last few weeks makes us realize that sometimes you do need to pause for the cause and stop and smell the roses. Let me get Abhijit back in. So Abhijit, I'm trying to draw that historical connection here, okay? That just paint us the picture. Now we are talking about somewhere the origins of the Nandas, okay? We know for a fact that in Takshila, which was the other great university town, which is now in North Pakistan, you had Kautilya writing the Arthashastra. Chandragupta was a student there. This is the time that Alexander the Great is invading. We've heard about from the Greek sources he came down to all the way till Porus, the Jhelum river, which he crossed, but didn't go much further than that. And the reality was India was an advanced civilization when Alexander was here, which was not a place of just half-naked fakirs.
Yes, indeed. When Alexander came to India, the Nanda dynasty was was in control of the nation, of the subcontinent, and it was way beyond anything Alexander could imagine. His soldiers mutinied and rebelled, and that's why he had to turn back, and that eventually led to his death. So when Alexander came here, India was a massively developed, very advanced civilization. The Nanda dynasty had its predecessors in the Sheshunaga dynasty in the Magad region. There was about a millennium of various dynasties before the Nandas in the Magad region and northern India, central India. And before the Nandas, you had essentially the Mahajanapadas era. And we don't know how far back it dates because it's never been properly dated. There were 16 major Mahajanapadas or republics in India. And this is post the Vedic age, which most likely coincides with the Saraswati Sindhu phase of our civilization. Or maybe even before that, maybe pre that. So that is essentially the loose chronology that we can infer. We still need archaeological evidence to put specific dates on these things. So that's how it was. And that is what ties in the Vedic age and the Saraswati Sindhu age to the Mahajanapadas and the Nanda dynasty and forward to the Gupta dynasty, which essentially is where
these are the golden ages of India. Okay, so Rituraj, aside from Nalanda itself, this period of time which traverses the birth of Buddhism, of Jainism in this geographical topographical region, the two great capitals, the great university town, and the great emperors, Chandragupta, Asoka, then down to the Gupta dynasty, which is the second golden age of India. What is this? Why is this period of our history so important even to our present national identity?
I think it's a foundational period because there had been a certain phase, a certain period that passed by, once the Indus Valley civilization, ended. For whatever reasons, we still don't know how that happened. Maybe climate change was the culprit. But then a couple of, centuries passed by, and then this particular period emerges. This was sort of a consolidational era where the emperors were actually building upon the work that had already been done. They were compiling the Puranas. They were, compiling all of the literature that we already had, in the plethora of scripts that existed back then. So people actually sort of consolidated all that, that had already existed, and shared it across with the other regions. So this was a period that marked, India once again making its mark on the world map. We had always been very well known, but the golden era, as it's called, the Gupta era, the rise of the Magad kingdom. These were particularly periods, which saw a re-emergence, a resurgence.
I mean, the edicts of Ashoka. You read about them in school. I did. Here's a chance to go, and maybe if you live in Delhi, Sri Fort, there's a pillar there, and you can read, "Thus spake the beloved of the gods, King Piyadasi, on the 26th year of his reign." You can read it in his own words when he's talking about Dhamma, okay, and that wheel of Dhamma is in the middle, right there behind me, behind my head.
And you mentioned Kautilya's Arthashastra. The manuscript, it's in a sad state. It still lies in the Oriental Research Institute in Mysuru. There's not even a dehumidifier in that chamber, where that manuscript still lies. So this, it's really a pathetic state. Many of the manuscripts are slowly rotting away. We have no formal, preservation mechanisms to actually look into them.
Rituraj, I remember reading Dalrymple's, first book, White Mughals. His entire introduction is about this, about how the entire Hyderabad archives were lost because they were left outside in the lawn during a monsoon. So it is tragic. We know this, but it is improving. and I'll take up this cause of the Kautilya manuscript. That's my promise to you. I'm going to take a very short break.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.